All right, we'll get started now, and others can file in over the next couple of minutes. But welcome, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us today for the December webinar. Changing media landscapes, will digital replace traditional broadcast? I'm Chantel Smith, and I am on the SMCC Education Steering Committee, and also on the Marketing Partnerships team at the NBA here in Toronto. As you've noticed, all attendees are muted and unable to turn on their video. This is to ensure that there's no background noise or distractions throughout the webinar. If you have any issues with your audio, please check your audio settings, which can be accessed in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. If you have any other issues, please let us know through the Q&A function, and we will try to resolve them. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on the SMCC website. SMCC would like to take the opportunity to thank our foundational partners. Without the support of each of these organizations on the screen, SMCC would not be able to host these events and initiatives, so thank you. I would also like to thank the people that helped bring this forum to life. It is never easy trying to organize an event the week before Christmas, so massive thank you to Sean, Christina, Elliot, Andrew, and the Redstone team. Save the date for the next webinar on Thursday, January 28th, 2021. Norm O'Reilly will be sharing the 10 positive things in Canadian sponsorship in 2020. Takeaways from the 14th annual Canadian sponsorship landscape. So keep an eye on your inbox early in the new year as more details will come. SMCC does value your input, and so we will be deploying a post-event survey following today's webinar. We would appreciate it if you would take a few minutes to fill out the survey or by scanning the QR code that's currently on your screen. Your feedback is critical as we use all of your notes to help improve future events and continue to bring you guys thought leadership that helps you and your organization succeed. So please take a minute and share your thoughts with us after today's event. Lastly, the SMCC offices will be closed starting Friday, December 18th until Monday, January 4th for the holidays. The team's taking a little break, but we'll be back in the new year to bring you all some great new content. So next, I am proud to introduce you all to today's Industry Insight presenter, Steve Levy, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Ipsos Canada. He leads client organization at Ipsos Canada. He is also an author of the Most Influential Brand Study, which is actually a global study. Steve is a board member of the Canadian Marketing Association, a judge for the Young Lions, and is engaged with the Earth Rangers Foundation. He's an avid golfer and tennis player, loves a great hamburger and fries, same here, and is also a father of two. Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Chantel. Can you see me?
Yes, I can.
Good. Okay, so I am going to share my screen now. If you just give me a second. Almost there. If everyone could just be a teeny weeny bit patient with me. Can you see the screen now?
You sure can.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be with everyone today. It's a kind of a cold, dreary day here in Toronto. By the way, the background that you can see is not a fake one. It really is the background that I have in my basement. Our presentation today is actually, it has less of a title and is more, we're really more posing a question here. And the question is whether or not the love that you as an industry have of your media and your perception of what the public does in this country from a media consumption perspective is in fact biasing your own decisions about what you may be doing and recommending for brands. And to help answer this question, I'm going to draw from a piece of research that we did for Think TV in 2017 and then repeated literally just a few weeks ago. And it is a study of the perceptions of you, the marketing community, about what you do and what you think the public does. And I will tell you at the outset that there is divergence. So today, in just 15 minutes, because Sean and Chantel told me that I really need to slim this story down to just 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you a very short story. And that short story is about bias. Now, I could just say thank you very much and ask you if you have questions at this point, but I am going to back up and prove some of these points. And perhaps we could start here with context. Now, Chantel, I'm assuming you're still there and you're going to keep me on track to ensure that you can in fact see the whole screen. If you could just say yes, that would be great.
I can see your whole screen.
Okay, thank you. So from a contextual perspective, that's the roughly 300 marketers and agencies that we spoke to, and them being the public in this country. And it is very clear that we're not the same. We're not the same. Demographically, we skew to Gen X. We're very much a Gen X industry. Gender-wise, we're not too different. We're not too different. But regionally, we also skew. We are very much Ontario-based, and indeed, we're very much Toronto-based. Trust me, you don't mirror the demographics of this country, not even close. Just for reference, the survey that we did in October of this year was very much with advertisers, creative agencies, publishers, media agencies, and digital agencies, as you can see here. But it's more than just the demographics. It's also about device ownership, because I think a lot of people in our business, as in the marketing community in Canada, think that all of these devices are pervasive. They're not. They're not. At least not to the same degree as they are with our cohorts. Whether it's smartphones or streaming devices or smart speakers, we're not the same. And in fact, it's more than just the devices. It's also about the content, because content is not as available to the public. It is as available, but they choose not to access it to the same degree that we do as a business. We're not the same. So I want to be very clear about that fact at the outset. So given that we only have 15 minutes, let's talk a little bit about us and them. And I will ultimately leave you with just 2 summary points and 1 consideration. One is that industry media habits and practices are markedly different from that of the public. They are markedly different. And I would suggest to you that industry perceptions of what the public thinks and does from a media consumption perspective are different from what we're doing, not the same. And that as a result, we have to question whether or not this is impacting our collective judgment. So let me perhaps provide you with a few proof points. Now, again, I might use television in the odd instance to make the case, but these points are not about television. They're about differences. So here's what the public tells us that they're doing from a media consumption perspective. Now, I recognize this is claimed behavior, so it won't be in line with Numeris and Vivid Data. It'll be a little bit different, but that's not the point. The point here isn't accuracy and proportionality. It really is about difference. So the public thinks that they watch about 2.5 hours on television, about half an hour on demand, an hour and a little bit on subscription services, an hour on YouTube, and so forth. Here's what we do as an industry. So we don't watch as much TV. We watch more subscription stuff. We're definitely accessing social more, and for sure we're using online for practical tasks more. So we're not consuming media in the same way as the public. But here is what we think the public is doing. We're not bad on our estimation of what the public's doing from a TV perspective, but we way overestimate what they're doing in terms of demand, subscription services, their use of YouTube, their use of social, and for sure, the degree to which they're using online for practical tasks. We don't estimate correctly, and we don't have the same habits. Again, I'm going to use television here as an example, but that's not the point. The point is I want you to focus on the differences. So the public, by and large, they watch TV on a TV screen 66% of the time. Okay, so 2/3 of the content that they're viewing is on a television screen. Yeah, they watch on a laptop, they do watch on a smartphone, that's a little bit up from 2017. So they do watch on other devices. Actually, we as an industry, most of what we do from a viewing perspective is we view television shows and movies also on a television screen. But we think the public doesn't do that. We estimate that the public is actually watching television on a TV screen much less than they say they are, and less than we are. And we overestimate what they're doing on a smartphone. Now, multi-screening, and as many of you know, is clearly an issue. It clearly is an issue. And again, the issue that I'm trying to allude to here isn't the multi-screening issue, it's the difference that I'm going to show you now. So the public make the point that 35% of the time that they're viewing content on television, they are in fact multi-screening. So they're not all of their attention, of course, is focused on what is on the big screen. Now, you could argue that the flip side, of course, is that for 65% of the time, they're very much engaged, which is with what's on that screen. But again, that's not the main point here. The main point is that we, as an industry, are much more likely to multi-screen than are the public. And indeed, our estimate of what the public is doing mirrors what we do, not what they do. Not what they do, not the same. We are overestimating what they do in terms of multi-screening. Again, only in 15 minutes, so I kind of narrowed this story down to take a quick look at apps used in the last month. And again, I would suggest to you that our lens appears to be coloring what we think Canadians are doing. So here's what the public's doing across a number of different apps. You know, I'm not going to read them. You can see which ones we've highlighted here. Here's what we do. So we're much more active in app usage in the past month than the public at large. And here's what we think Canadians are doing. We think they're doing what we're doing. They're not. We're way overestimating. And if I round that picture out with a whole bunch of other apps, you can see that the story is basically the same. You look at the Tinder number, it's gigantic. It's just not reality, not reality. So, look, there are many things that we want advertising to do. There's no question about it. There are generally 7 that we at Ipsos tend to focus on. You know, some advertising, yeah, we want it to make you laugh. And we want the public to have it, have whatever it is we're promoting to stick in their memory. We want them to feel emotional in some regard, to talk about it with others. We want the public to like advertising, and we certainly want it to make products and brands more recognizable. But the one perhaps that I'm just going to touch on very briefly here is the 7th thing that we really want advertising to do, which is that we want to draw people's attention to products and brands that they have not heard of. And if I only look at that one attribute, again, we seem to kind of flip-flop with the public here, because when we think about which of the following media people are most likely to find advertising that draws their attention to a product or brand that they haven't heard of, the public would say television 40% of the time. We as an industry would say television 15% of the time, but it flip-flops on social, which is, you know, clearly the converse of what's actually happening at a time when the marketing industry is clearly spending more on social tactics. Clearly spending more on social tactics. So in the 15 minutes that I've had with you, I would leave you, and again, recognizing that this is a very compressed story, I'd leave you with just a few takeaways. First, We don't look like the public, and we're clearly conflating that as if we think we do. Some of our media habits very much differ from those of the public at large. As an industry, we are overestimating the public's digital content media consumption, and our budget, by and large, is reflecting that overestimate. At minimum, we as an industry probably need to be thinking about adjusting our marketing and media plans with the public more in mind. And perhaps at best, there needs to be a bit of a level setting and some training. And on that note, I'll thank you very much for your time. I recognize that it's been a compressed story. I know that there's a discussion that's going to follow now. If you have questions, feel free to probably to jot them to SMCC, and to the extent that I can, I'll try and answer to them. Chantel, back to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. You were actually a little short on time. So
I was, okay.
But appreciate you taking the time. That's very insightful. And I know that the panel coming up will definitely probably address some of the insights that you just shared. So now I will introduce our moderator for today, who is Ishma Alexander Hewitt. Ishma has been in the media industry for 18 years, leading accounts across a variety of categories, including travel, QSR, toys, and financial. She's an expert in consumer culture and motivations, and her talents are buoyed by awards she's received, such as a Silver Atomic Award for work that she's done on Wendy's, as well as a Bronze Media and Innovation Award for her and her team's work on RBC. She is passionate about coaching up talent, leading her to create 44 custom learning paths covering media fundamentals to advanced analytics. She believes in culture, diversity, and inclusion, and how these are all critical for talent to reach their full potential. So she acts as a leader in this space by co-chairing Media Brands Canada Black Employee Network, also creating initiatives, the Initiative Culture Club, and supporting and visiting communities in rural Kenya. Outside of the office, Ishma spends time with her husband and 3 kids, watching Marvel movies or performing in the Afro Community Steel Band. In addition, she donates her time to the NIA Centers of Performing Arts, and as an autism mom, participates in local autism and ADHD awareness initiatives. So welcome, Ishma. We are so excited to have you here today and to hear more about your background and insights as you moderate today's panel.
Thank you.
Next, I will be introducing you guys to Adam Burchell, who is now the head of music at TikTok. After a decade of working his way up the ranks of the local music industry, he landed at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment as part of the newly then created music partnerships team, a joint venture the company had embarked on with Live Nation Canada. There, Adam focused on the development and execution of Live Nation Canada's partnership strategy with some of the world's leading brands. In addition to commercial strategy, Adam oversaw the company's entertainment response to the COVID-19 pandemic, launching the Budweiser Stage at Home television series, as well as the OLG Play Stage sports and concert driving complex. Now, on the music leadership team at TikTok, Adam leads music strategy within Canada while working cross-functionally with global markets to shape how music and music programming on the platform will evolve across the world. Welcome, Adam. Next up, we have Ria Senta, who is an entertainment marketer with a passion for building strategic marketing plans that connect brands with the live music space in Canada. As a director of live music and entertainment in the Global Partnerships Division at MLSE, Ria leads corporate partnerships development and strategy for Live Nation as a function of the joint venture with MLSE. Ria's passion for strategy and marketing comes from the 5 years of prior agency experience, where she focused specifically on communication planning and execution in the CPG space. So welcome, Ria. Last, but certainly not least, we have Charlie Miller, Vice President of Content Acquisition at Rogers. Charlie is an accomplished content and digital business development executive, with more than 15 years experience spanning across various industries. He thrives on the challenges and opportunities to grow revenue for new and existing products through partnership building. In his current role as VP of Content Acquisition at Rogers Communication, his goal is to develop partnerships with new entertainment services, new service providers, I should say, and help lead change in the Canadian media landscape, expanding opportunities for Canadians to view the latest and greatest entertainment offerings. In addition to his work at Rogers, Charlie has recently been elected to the co-research chair for the Canadian and Telecommunications Association for Marketing. Welcome, Charlie. So I will turn it over to you, Ishma, to take away the panel and Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks, Chantel. And welcome to all the panelists. I'm really excited to be talking with you all about this topic today because, to be honest, it comes up daily or weekly at the office, is will digital take over traditional TV? And I think before we even jump into some of the prepared questions that I had, I would love to get all of your feedback or reaction to the data that we just saw from Steve Levy. I'll be honest, I was surprised. I think we pride ourselves as planners, I'm on the media side, obviously, of the way that we look into data. We make sure that all of our insights are informed and that our channel planning is informed, but we're also often asked, overall, what's our opinion on something? So to see that data come back with that discrepancy from the industry, for me, was surprising. Wondering how you all feel about it. Adam, we'll start with you.
I just assumed Charlie paid him off.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think it's fantastic research.
No, I don't know. I think personally, it's, it's certainly interesting. And I just personally tend to believe that when we think about what watching TV means, as you said, it was self-reported. Mm-hmm. I think that watching TV, and it may be odd to say, is more of a subjective term, because I do watch a lot of my entertainment is done through a television screen, but that doesn't necessarily make it traditional television. But I do agree with them that I think that the way that marketers think about media consumption habits and the way the general public thinks about media consumption habits are probably skewed. I know in the music space, Toronto is not the rest of the country.
Right.
So I can certainly relate from a music perspective on that, for sure.
Sure.
I can chime in. I thought the research, not surprising at all. We still see primary viewing habits around traditional TV. However, it's more like, what's more interesting to me is really where the puck is going, and how do we as an industry start to have insights on what do we do in the future and where do we see the customer behaviors going. So I thought it was interesting that the research sort of took it as a point in time. As you dig into that, you can see the trends are shifting. And there are trends where, yes, you have those traditional TV viewers. They are now mixing in over-the-top services like the Netflix, like the Amazon Prime Video. Disney Plus is growing heaps and bounds now, right? And I think you're seeing more of that mixing of traditional and OTT services. And that's happening in that 35 plus market. What's very interesting, and I think he touched on it, Steve touched on it a little bit, but that 18 to 34 market, not traditional TV users. So from a marketing perspective, if you're looking to reach that market, you're not looking at TV too. So I think that you sort of have to unpack it a little bit to dissect where the puck is going. So you're going there. I think that's sort of the interesting part to me.
Yeah, sure. It's just interesting to me to see the discrepancy in what our perception is of non-industry Canadians to what the data is showing. Ria, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's definitely interesting. I think we all as marketers have our own biases towards channels and
we're human, right?
Yeah, of course. And we say this a lot, like take your marketing hat off and think audience first. I think that's something that really stuck with me with what Steven said. And it's, fundamentally where I believe the landscape is going is thinking about your customer first rather than evaluating channels in sort of a vacuum or a silo. So I definitely think it's important that we all check our biases and evaluate what we're trying to accomplish from that customer first and then channel strategy second perspective. So.
Sure. I can't tell you the number of clients, and Ria, when you were agency side, you probably had this as well, where a client gives you feedback on a certain channel saying that they don't believe that people watch it because they don't watch it or read it or view it, whatever it is, or use it. And it's hard to wrap your head around something that you haven't experienced yourself, or those close to you haven't experienced. So we're always telling our clients to get in the mind of the consumer. Clearly, we need to always also do so ourselves. But I think you're right, Charlie. Overall, we do have to unpack it, and I think that's exactly what we do. Is, we're talking about 18 to 34 versus 65 plus. And actually, when I was thinking about this, and we were talking the other day, it struck me that when we're asking that question, do we think that digital will take over traditional TV? That can mean a lot of different things, like in what context, right? You could be looking at reach potential. You could be looking at how quickly reach builds, consumption by demo, ad revenue. So for you all, I'd like to understand, if we're posing this question, what does that look like to you, digital taking over traditional TV? What does that look like to you in your respective roles or companies? And Charlie, we'll start with you.
Thanks. So I think if you start with the customer, I think the trends that we're seeing as influenced by digital is really that customers are starting to and now know, regardless of demographic, the shows and the games they want to watch. So it's less about channel 33, or it's less about channel 127, and more about the show and the game they want to watch. So what is that? And that's been influenced by digital. I think now that we have the water cooler talk in the COVID world is around digital, our social networks, getting access to that information. So how does that affect traditional, traditional TV distributors? I think in that respect, the big TV packages, where you've got 60, 100 channels in that TV package, having numbers of channels is less valuable to customers now. And so I think that's been influenced by digital and by these digital over-the-top services. And so, therefore, what does that really mean, for us as a TV distributor? Is we have to start to think about not just TV channels, but the digital services. And I think that's what's really the change we're seeing. That is the change we're seeing, is the digital services are coming in and influencing our customer offerings. So it's no longer just about, getting 15 channels. It's no longer offering, a value pack around channels. It's more about what other services are you offering as part of that proposition. Is it internet? Is it OTT services? Things like that are coming in. And you're seeing that around Canada, TELUS offering bundle OTT offerings, flexible packaging in different places. So that's the influence of digital that I see right now. And I think that's only going to grow exponentially with the TV providers.
Yeah, fair. It's interesting because your answer leans a bit more to the impact that digital is having, because it is transforming everything, right? From the way that we communicate or travel to the way that we consume channels. But it doesn't sound like you think we're there yet, that digital has taken over traditional TV.
No, it's and again, it goes into that sort of demographic split, right? Exactly, I think if you were looking at the 18 to 34 market, and I think the research supports that, is it has taken over, and it is as that demographic ages, and I would argue that it's 18 to 40, right? You could expand that demographic bucket a little bit, whereas really the primary viewing, young kids are all online, on OTT services. There's research to support that, as well as the mix of TV versus OTT. Traditional TV channel surfing is really low with that younger demographic. So if you're trying to reach that demographic, it's very much more skewed to an over-the-top content offering.
Okay, Ria, what are your thoughts on that for your industry, which I know is quite different now than previously? What does that look like to you, digital taking over traditional TV?
Yeah, I think, well, if I'm speaking from my current position, I'm sort of in the middle of these two over here, where I sit, on the partnership side of things. And what's incredibly important for us is making sure that we extend the magic of what we're able to create through live experiences in a pre-pandemic world into the appropriate media channels. So for us, it's less about the battleground between digital versus broadcast and more about where can our partners' message most authentically extend and what channel is the right place for them to be able to do so. If I'm speaking from my past life, I've always found it very interesting, again, that push and pull between digital versus television, because ultimately I do believe that the most successful marketing strategies are ones that leverage both in a very complementary way, rather than those, again, operating in silos or independently of each other or flighted strategically so one fills a gap when the other is off air. To me, that's an antiquated way of looking at media. And it's just important for us to be able to authentically weave those stories together. So when we're looking at partnerships, or our brand partners in particular, it's, again, what's the story we tell through our live events? Because at Live Nation, again, that's our bread and butter. And how can we make sure that the people that are at those events are not the only people that are experiencing the magic of what that partner is doing?
Yeah. Fragmentation, for lack of a better word, is definitely a much bigger consideration than it ever was. And how do you effectively plan for that? Adam, what does it mean for you? I mean, you're at TikTok now, so your lens will be a bit different.
Yeah, I've been here 6 weeks, so I'm a little expert now.
You're a veteran now.
Honestly, I don't even really know what digital means. I think that even the way that we're looking at things needs to evolve, because, like in the last presentation, Pinterest and Tinder, I believe, were shown as, competitors to television. And what? Like, I don't, I thought the presentation was great, but like this idea of lumping in any type of new age media and comparing it to, the old guard, they're just wildly different things. So, and I know that my head of comms is on this call. So Janet, I'll try not to give you a heart attack when I talk about this, but like ultimately for me, when we think about competing with TV, I don't even think about that. I'm really here to help tell stories and help people discover these stories that they might not know that they'd be looking for. Like, Charlie mentioned, when it comes to traditional television, the cable packages are going away because people know the games they want to watch, or they know the shows they want to watch. I think for me, being at TikTok is the most exciting, because we're helping people be discovered and discover topics that they didn't even know that they were interested in. And so as media evolves over time, I think that I'm the most excited about how, if you want to call it digital, we can call it digital, but we're taking a democratic approach to content distribution, and the discoverability and the room for new voices is just increasing more and more. And I think as a marketer, that's exciting, because, as we know, we're trying to target very specific people. Canada is more and more becoming, the word fractured was used. I don't, fractured to me feels like it has a bit of a negative connotation to it, but as human beings, we're all becoming more individualized. And I think that that's a great thing. And we're celebrating that, And so to me, I don't know if it's necessarily about all of these different things competing, but just, I think new media is certainly providing new perspectives and new values to Canadians.
Sure. It's interesting that point you made about Pinterest and Tinder, because I would argue, if I go back to my early planning days, Pinterest is like planning magazine almost. It's, it serves the same purpose. So it's really about what the consumer is using those channels for and building up from there. And digital is really just the technology, right? It's how people are consuming things. You talked a bit, Adam, just now about democratic content distribution. And when we were speaking the other day, the notion came up that content really trumps channel, which sort of leans into what we were talking about here, is that it's what people want to consume and then where they're going to go and find it. But on that notion of content distribution, can you speak to your thoughts on whether the current content distribution is actually accelerating the growth of digital, or is it holding it back by any means?
I think it's accelerating a number of different things. We actually just released our global music result earlier today, and over 170 artists on TikTok this year reached a billion streams, a billion views on their songs. Some of them in just a few days. So when you talk about acceleration as an artist or as a creator, that's like, those are big. The scale of that is massive. So I think that that's important. I also think, from a sponsorship lens, and I did this for, the better part of a decade, I think that the way that media is evolving and that democratic approach to content is the best thing to happen to sponsorship marketers since the advent of the rink board. And ultimately what I mean by that is, ultimately the power in who sees your work is really dependent on the public. It's easy to buy ad packages against, television broadcast or what have you. But I think, up to a certain point, that really just means you're only as good as your wallet is deep. And I think the sponsorship industry at large has always struggled with trying to articulate the value in IP or the value in rights fees. And I know, having worked, at MLSE for many years, and Live Nation, that was always in RIA, like I was in the room with you for years trying to explain to people, like, no, the value isn't in how many people necessarily are in our database that we can send an email to, but the value is actually in your ability to take your company, smash it up against music or sports, and create something that might get the world's attention. The problem is, as a marketer, when you're trying to value that, there is no standardized operating procedure for all of us agreeing that, oh, okay, that value is X, the way that an impression value can be calculated. So I think as media evolves and we think, again, about this democratic approach to content, I think what that's going to do is, if you have the ability to work with an artist directly or the Raptors directly and make content in that content is likely going to perform better on these democratic media distribution entities than somebody who doesn't have access to that. So now when we think about, as a marketer, okay, well, why am I writing the check to the Raptors for X millions of dollars? It's because my media does better when there's a Raptor in it or when there's the Mavs in it. So I think there's acceleration across the board in that regard. Ria, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, you talked a bit about the measurement, and we talked about measurement the other day, Ria, and how we've evaluated many sponsorship proposals and then have to go back to say, I can only evaluate the media portion. There's other elements here. So would love to hear from you on your thoughts, and now that you've been on both sides of it as well.
Yeah, my favorite topic is measurement and evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, what are the opportunities or barriers with sponsorship opportunities moving to digital in terms of measurement, and what do we need to have in order to be more successful?
Yeah, it's interesting, particularly given my last role and everything sort of having this standardized formula attached to it, A plus B equals C. Sure. When you come into sponsorship and partnership, I think, we've evolved greatly, but when I first started, it was like X plus B equals C times 2, and that's how we figure it all out, and that's the way that it goes. But I think that, like, it's important to level set that at Live Nation, we haven't traditionally had mass media opportunities like television to rely on as a component of our partnerships. Like, our bread and butter, as I mentioned, is the live music experience. And it's really about the ancillary brand strategies that we can develop to complement that world. As you mentioned, that's a real challenge for marketers and agencies to wrap their heads around, particularly in the stage of evaluating a program. And we often are lined up against traditional media like digital or broadcast, and we're measured on metrics that aren't particularly relevant. Coming from my past life, I can understand why evaluation is important, but back to what Adam said, I think it's just very important to have a clear lens on what the true objective of a partnership in music or sports actually means for a brand. Like, it truly is impact, perception, competitive advantage, culture. It's not GRPs.
Right.
As we evolve, I think it's of course a priority for Live Nation to find the right places to amplify our message. We're doing ourselves a disservice if we don't evolve. But ultimately, we've always said this, and Adam will like roll his eyes or give me a thumbs up at this, but what good is an impression if you aren't able to make one with a consumer? So I think that the challenge in our world, if I'm going back to your question, is how do we replicate the magic of what we create in person through digital or television or whatever other media channel we're tapping into?
Yeah.
We've certainly had a ton of success with that this year and built a lot of momentum, both in the digital space and in the television space. But music is a cherished property and people don't want to see it over commercialized. So it's how do we create moments in mass media that feel special instead of feeling gross, for lack of a better.
Sure. It's a little bit like creative, really. I mean, when the media plans are evaluated, there's definitely some science to it. There's art to it as well, but with the creative, it's more subjective. And a lot of times, I feel like some of these sponsorship opportunities, there is a level of subjectivity because you're talking about how to connect with people and how to engage people in a way that isn't just about the number of impressions, as you say.
Yeah, that's right. That's totally right. I think it's like we talked about this a little bit, previously as well, but it's complementing the relevance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Live Nation can bring to the table or any other property can bring to the table with that reach. So it really is that art and science that you mentioned.
For sure. Yeah. The reach plus relevance. You mentioned something just now. Oh, just about learning different ways to engage consumers. And Charlie, I know we were talking, I would argue that COVID has accelerated the growth of free OTT consumption. And we talked a little bit, you talked about that a bit earlier, but that growth isn't going to go anywhere, in my opinion, at least in the post-vaccine era. Like those things are going to maintain. Disney is, I think, projecting doubling their subscriptions this year to Disney Plus. So my question to you is, how do you see this changing the way that marketers actually go and engage and reach consumers if we have a lot of ad-free platforms out there?
Yeah, I love this conversation. This is really, I think, where the meat and potatoes is, because traditional TV, I think we know that space, right? We know how that operates. We know the measurements. We even can plug it into a lot of big media companies, think about it in terms of programmatic advertising spend, and it's just that it's done. But now you've got these ad-free services, you've got new platforms coming into people's homes. How do you reach them with media? This is something we think a lot about. And number one, I think you've got to take a real a consulting view of the media space now. You have to bring more of the people together at the table. So you've got your broadcast spend, you've got your main content you're trying to promote, the brand or a brand partnership with a big content party like the Raptors or something like that. But then there are new players in the space that we have to start to think about and talk to, which is very new to some of us. Some are already working in there, but the platforms. How do you work with, Rogers, not Rogers Media, but myself and the product team at Rogers or Bell or TELUS or whoever it may be, and look at their platforms? And how do you talk about media buys with respect to their platforms and leverage those platforms? Because the platforms are leveraging algorithms and analytics and lots of different new measurements, some of them traditional, but some of them new, time spent in over the top services and how we're looking at the usage of our platforms and where the audiences are there. So the use of platforms in the conversation of media buys and promotion of emotional brands is an interesting piece. Then you've got over the top services that are ad free. How do you reach those customers? Because they've told the service that, hey, look, I don't want to watch ads. Well, things are changing. You're hearing lots of rumbling around an ad model, paywalls, freemium models before the paywall, sort of Spotify-esque of how they've done it. Those music models are starting to become a little bit more popular. Even linear channels online, you're starting to see more interest around promoting and taking the broadcast world into a freemium model where you have that sort of watch a couple ads and then you're watching the content and then it's sort of building up from there. Tubi's one that's come to Canada where you're seeing Tubi grow in viewership dramatically over the last sort of while, and they're ad-based. So you're seeing those services come up. And then really interesting things in terms of how new services are coming into different platforms. And I wanted to give a shout out to TikTok on that one because just recently TikTok did a deal with Samsung and smart TVs. So you're seeing ads now, or the TikTok world, get into a mainstream TV viewing environment, and how that plays out is going to be really interesting. I know, Adam, I'm going to be really keen to see how that works out. And though if those types of distribution deals for new services like TikTok, even though it's not really new anymore, but find new audiences in that medium.
Thanks for the plug.
All right.
It's available only in the UK right now, but tell your UK friends to check it out. Pretty great.
Charlie, I'm just going to bring up my caveat like I did the other day when we speak about programmatic. I was saying if anybody on my team was setting it and forgetting it with the programmatic, there'd be a problem. So that's not how we operate, but I do understand that it is a potential, it can be an issue.
It's funny. I've had lots of conversations over the last 6 months where you hit a little bit of a brick wall because some of the things we want to do, it doesn't fit into the square, hole or the round hole. And so I've got a triangle, I'm trying to fit it in there. And it's funny. Those conversations I think need to happen is to say, okay, how do we break out of this and be more consulting oriented around what we want to do for our customers?
Sure. At Initiative, we mentioned this earlier, but we always talk about reach plus relevance. And if you're only thinking about reach, then you're right. It'll be a set it and forget it, and you're making sure you're optimizing and keeping fraud out. But that's pretty much it. But if you're not planning for relevance, then you're not thinking about the sponsorship pieces or the content or the integration, because that's the only way you're going to connect with people. Otherwise, you're just trying to outshout everybody. And that's only going to get you so far, right? Share voice is important, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle, in my opinion.
I think too, just to double down on that a little bit, like I think that the way that media is changing allows marketers to act like publishers. And I think that that's a really exciting thing. Like if you talk to the different tech companies about what they want, I talk about, I want to bring stories to people and I want people to find those stories interesting. That's my job. I know in working with really, really smart marketers that we focus actually on the narrative. We spend most of the time thinking about like, okay, well, what's the story that we're going to tell? So if you think, about, what the Raptors may have done in the past with GoDaddy, I think is a great example of like, that's just like really fun, compelling content, or what Live Nation's doing right now with Coca-Cola, with Johnny Orlando and Havaya Mighty, which Rhea is not on TikTok. Huge miss, by the way. Johnny Orlando's got like 9 million, like people love Johnny Orlando on the platform. But my point is that, what we're getting away from is payola. To your point, Ishmael, like, yeah, you can like just sort of like buy your way into a shouting match, but everyone's yelling, so you don't really hear anything. Especially sponsorship marketing, what you're doing is like, you're getting to like, I remember writing Google Home scripts for DeMar DeRozan and being like, how do I get paid to do this? This is the coolest effort, and I know that passion is what drives all of the marketers at these properties, music, sport, arts, culture. And these new media platforms are more than ever giving you the opportunity to tell people about that. The challenge is it takes time,
Yes.
You got to lean into that. Like, it's not just about like, okay, I'm going to buy my spot on the Big Bang Theory on CTV and call it a day. It doesn't work that way. So we always used to joke, Rhea and I, the best work makes the most money, and more that's about to become true, because it's not just about the narrative, but it's about how you craft how you're going to tell the story. Yeah, that'll really make or break you.
There is also a point where in a lot of the tech platforms, we're garbage at some of this stuff too, right? Like we do not know how to talk to customers about stuff that's not our products and services, right? Like we don't get it. That's not our strength, right? I'll be really honest. So I think that's where there's a huge opportunity for way smarter people than myself to come in and speak to how to sort of weave in a brand story, how to weave in that really compelling music or sports story onto the platform. Because all we've done traditionally is put up an electronic programming guide from 1 to 400 channels and said, there you go. It's not really compelling. The days of that are really, the programming guide, no one's really going to as much anymore. They know the services and the games and the shows they want to see.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this that are watching this, but I think there's nothing more frustrating than getting work or a spot or a strategy pushed down to you from a market that perhaps isn't relevant.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I've been in that position many, many times, current and past life, and it just feels like you want to bang your head against the wall because you don't have the liberty to think creatively for your market or your audience. So I think I totally agree with what both Adam and Charlie are saying. It's, having the ability to think freely and independently, and also to be able to lean into these spaces that, we all are naturally so passionate about. Everyone loves music, everyone loves sports. We can all find our ways to think about what we would want to consume and really create for the climate rather than being, forced to air a 30-second spot because the US did and we want to save some dollars on non-working. So it's sort of, making sure we find that balance.
Yeah, and I think to Adam's point, the time, there is an investment in time and it has a huge ROI, but you need to have that opportunity to develop that strategy that's well thought out, that talks about how do you engage and how do you make yourself relevant. Because buying TV spots, we know how to do that, and that's likely a part of it, but that's just a base layer. And if you're not investing the time for those nuances, or like a 70-20-10 rule, then you find yourself.
And I'll go you one more. I think with the research, just going back to the research, if that's what you're consistently doing and that's the media spend, and that's great, but the reality is that's changing. And if you're not trying to build the activity in another area and get expertise in that area, you're going to be left being an expert in something that's a real declining market. And that's the key thing, is to build up your expertise in the other areas.
Evolve or die.
Yeah, exactly.
So we only have a few minutes left, and it wouldn't be a panel if I didn't ask you guys to pull out your crystal balls. I know for initiative, we've started investing in items like we have our content discipline that's being grown out, plus analytics, plus project management, because there are so many subject matter experts that need to be pulled in to really design and plan a proper ecosystem. How do you each see the landscape changing? And we talked about 3 to 5 years. Let's even say 3 years, because 5 years, who knows? I think someone had said we might be on Mars at that point. But how should properties and agencies and brands really be preparing for that is my question. And Adam, I'll start with you.
I think that marketers in general should really start thinking about, we touched on this earlier, how they validate results. Because I think as we talk about evolve or die, in Charlie's point, which I think is really profound, in that, like, if you're rooted in something, you're going to be left out of the next 50 years, right? And so I think that the industry at large really needs to think about that. I want to co-sign as hard as I can the act of sponsorship as a marketing vehicle, because I truly understand, having lived in it, the impact that it can have. I just think that the validation of it is antiquated at this point. And so as a marketer, as a marketing industry, my gut tells me that we're going to be in a lot of trouble if we continue to value it the way that we valued it 10 years ago.
I totally agree. Ria, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, it's a very tough question.
I know.
Obviously, the media landscape is a mirror for current events. And I don't think that anyone could have predicted the year that we all just experienced and how different media formats and platforms have adjusted or surged, like TikTok. And ultimately, like, things have been reprioritized even within the last 9 months to reflect the current climate. But like, again, I would double down on what Adam's saying, and I'm biased because obviously I am a partnership and a sponsorship marketer, but the opportunity I feel and where I hope that the industry goes is continuity, integration, and leveraging the power of what we can collectively create to ultimately drive the same type of results at an ROI level that in the past a television buy might have been perceived to be on a marketing strategy. So I hope like we continue to prioritize audience first planning strategies, accessibility, creative liberties, and ultimately trust and that democratization of information. I think like that is where we all win.
Brilliant. And Charlie, I know you had a visitor there who might have had some extra insight.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
I think we talked about a lot of them. Like, I agree with the panel. I think we, as media buyers and media agencies out there, look to your platform partners, Roku, Ignite TV, Bell 5, other ones around Canada, Apple TV. Look to those partners and see what you can do. The aggregation of content is great on those platforms, but it's getting cluttered out there. And for brands to be heard past just broadcast content, I think it depends on us having relationships with our platform partners.
Yep.
And that's just not Rogers, that's sort of across everybody.
Yep.
I promote Roku in that as well. And then I think the second thing is look to see all of the over-the-top ad-free models having ads, having an ad portion. I don't think it's sustainable for that market to keep growing and asking customers to pay 10, 20 bucks, $8 to keep adding these subscription services. I don't think you're going to be able to reach all the customers in that type of space, because wallet shares would say that you're already capping out the customer's wallet share.
For sure, share of
So
wallet.
services like TikTok and others that provide customers sort of an integrated ad view, I think will become more prolific, more profound. And I agree with Adam's point that hit content will help advertisers gain audience, and that democratization of content will be a really interesting thing for advertisers to explore in the future.
Yeah, follow the content. Thank you so much for your time and all of your insights. I'm sure the audience appreciates it as well. Great conversation. Chantel, I will pass it back over to you with, I think, 90 seconds to go.
Thank you very much. And thank you guys. Steve from earlier, Ishma, amazing moderating, Ria, Adam, Charlie, really appreciate your insights. I know I'm walking away with more knowledge, and I'm sure our members are as well. Thank you to everybody that tuned in this afternoon. We hope you also found this educational. Again, thank you to the Education Committee and Redstone for putting on today's event. As a reminder, if you guys could complete the survey, here's the QR code, and we'll also send out an email shortly. But happy holidays, and we'll see everybody very soon. Thanks.
Happy holidays. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, happy holidays.